This week, I am super excited to be talking with Rachel McGuire, which is the pen name for writing duo Rachel Graham and Leanne McGuire Whitlock. And we are going to be talking about their debut thriller, On the Surface, which had so many of my favorite things in it. I love thrillers that deal with and touch on social media. I think it's really interesting when thrillers take a look at true crime and the way that we get attached to it online. So I was super excited to read this, and once I started it, I could not put it down. But here's the synopsis. Sawyer Stone III and Dani Fox, a young couple who spends their time circumnavigating the globe aboard their 42-foot sailboat and documenting it for their fledgling YouTube channel, Sailing with the Foxes, have anchored in Exuma in the Bahamas. As they wait for the price of crypto to rebound so they can provision and continue their journey, they're partying and exploring with their fellow cruisers offshore. On the surface, everything looks perfect, but one night, Dani vanishes after a boat party, and Sawyer has no memory of her disappearance. The search for Dani is initially fueled by concerns that she drowned during one of her daily ocean swims. But Dani's prescheduled video post recorded before she went missing soon reveal a darker side to her relationship with Sawyer. Meanwhile, Royal Bahamas Police Force investigator Veronique Knowles has her hands full trying to keep the investigation on course as the story of the American woman missing in the Bahamas goes viral and the internet sleuths unearth secrets from Sawyer's past. Sawyer Stone is far from perfect, but is he a murderer? I flew through this book, could not put it down. I was so hooked. It has multiple points of view, so if you love that, you're gonna love this. I thought it was really cool having the perspective of the people involved and then zooming out and having the police's perspective sometimes as well. And the ending is just wild. You absolutely not guess it. So that being said, let's get into it. The first thing that I wanted to know was, when did you guys both realize you wanted to write a book or that you wanted to be an author?
So maybe we actually met through a book club in the South when we both lived there. I lived there for less than a year, and Leanne lived there for a number of years. And we, of course, we met through a book club, right? So we've always been interested. And Leanne was a lit major, right? Before she went to law school. So
But it never gave me the desire to be an author. Like, I think having a background that was more working class, my career aspirations were always to get that bag, it's to
Yes.
be a lawyer or something where I never really entertained ideas of a financially precarious career path such as writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's has definitely the luxury of being able to take the time to do it has come to me later in life, and but I'm super appreciative of it now. And Rachel and I both have teenagers, and we think oh, it's wonderful for them that they could I'm always saying to my teen oh, you could be a filmmaker or be something really cool, and she just wants to be a computer programmer. And it's oh, so it's disappointing to me. It's so pragmatic. um, I like those the pie in the sky career aspirations, but
Yeah.
I never had them myself as a kid.
and
Yeah.
it's a hard road. It's a harder road than I think you could imagine as a kid, the rejection.
So much. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of it sounds like a hobby sometimes once you're an adult more than anything, even though it's not. It can definitely be
Right,
more.
right,
Yeah.
right. And a lot of
So,
people make freelance careers and and
yeah.
and write in addition to doing a million other things until they actually have enough success. Kate McKeon has a great Substack on agenting, and
Mm,
she has a great piece about the dog catching the car of uh, writing full time and how
yeah.
much pressure there is and no benefits and no holidays. It's really an interesting piece.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah. I'm gonna have to look that up for sure. So did
I
you
think it's
guys write it all before you guys wrote together? Basically, did you have separate processes or did you develop your writing process together?
so I wrote, I have done some writing. I've been published in romance years ago, and then had just discoverability so hard. I had stopped, and life got crazy, and a couple more moves. We're in California now, but we moved a fair amount. My husband's a software engineer, but he's also a helicopter pilot. So we're a family that follows our dreams,
That's
even if they
awesome.
don't pay that well.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, yeah, so I had done a little bit. And so this story, I think, was an outgrowth of the pandemic and watching a lot of YouTube channels on people going places and traveling. Leanne is a huge traveler, so much more well-traveled than I am. I'm so envious of all the traveling she's done. And unfortunately, I think the majority of mine in the last, at least 15 years since having kids has been virtually watching other people travel, like
Yeah.
on sailing channels. So.
Yeah. Nice. So how did you guys approach writing it together? Did you guys like pick certain chapters to write? Did you go back and forth?
It's so organic for us. We had an outline we worked from, that grew into a draft. And then we shared it, like, I think it started in Scrivener, right, Leanne? And then we moved it into Google Docs, and we would just pop in and out.
Mm,
Um, that doesn't sound very, I mean, it was all very logical until the characters take on their own
mm-hmm.
will. And
Yeah.
then it becomes, right, Leanne, it becomes like just following what they tell us to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Like because we don't live close to one another, like we have made it a point at the beginning of the project to like get together and do a sort of intensive few days boot camp of plotting. So we had really knew where this plot was going to go, and there were some like minor changes, but like we had the plot mapped out before we started filling in the scenes and developing characters, and that sort of came more organically afterwards. But that way we could just sort of go and write on our own, and then just do those like revisions to each other's writing so much so that it's like just kind of blends together. And I think it's not really noticeable of like we're not doing separate parts of the book, we're both doing kind of everything, although
Yeah.
sometimes like spoke more for different characters, but yeah, it's a really interesting process, to the point where like now I can't remember, who came up with whatever aspects of it. I'm like, was that me or was that Rachel?
Yeah,
It does
whose
start
line
like,
was that?
yes,
Yeah,
to take the credit or the blame. But
right.
that's the beauty of having a co-author, is that anything like, oh, for the like uh little bit of racy bit, I can blame that on Rachel for my
Oh,
my
it was a lot
Baptist
racier.
relatives. Yeah.
There's only one questionable scene that has any degree of, I wouldn't even call it spice because it's essentially an assault, really.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I had added a bunch of adjectives in there because I've read probably more in romance than any other genre, although I read throughout the genres.
Hmm.
And that scene ended up coming out much spicier. And and it didn't quite fit. And the beauty of our working together is, like, if I think that Leanne wrote something that doesn't quite fit, I'll sit on that and think about it,
Mm.
but we leave it in. And then if our beta readers bring it up, or our editor will discuss a change, and this is for stuff I write as well as Leanne.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, we don't sort of police each other throughout the process, which is really helpful, I think. And
Hmm.
we have pretty small egos, I'd say. And so we're not super, like, we're not trying to kill each other's darlings, you know?
Yeah.
You
That's
have you
really
have to tell
cool.
the story though, the story that I love so much of you and the
Taking
mugger, because it's
feedback.
like, yes, yeah, yes.
Yeah. I worked in a years and years ago in my 20s, I worked in a doctor's office, and someone came in from the street, went through the office manager's desk, stole her purse, and I see her fighting with him in the hallway. And I don't know why, but maybe because I was a firefighter paramedic, my first instinct was like to get myself involved in the
Yeah.
situation. So she gets knocked to the ground. He runs through the waiting room. I run after him. I yell to the security guard, stop him. He's a thief. He's carrying a woman's handbag. And the
Yeah.
woman at the end just watches him run by, watches me run by. And then he turns around and looks at me because I was a pretty good runner at the time. I was running like 20 miles a week. And he turns over his shoulder, he looks at me and he says, "You are a dumb B word." And I stopped in my tracks. I was like, he's right. I mean, I should not be running after this person. He could have weapons. He could have. So that adrenaline that had me going just like I stopped in my tracks and I was like, that was important feedback. I needed to take that feedback. So
it's like the perfect example of like what makes a great co-author though. It's like, it's that being able to like hear stuff and not go like, stay committed to what you're doing. It's like, I can intake this information and revise and move on. And we don't always 100% agree with each other's like feedback, but like, it's I think those having the small egos definitely helps. It's like much more collaborative and we're not, fighting for whatever little real estate or something, like a little idea or scene. Like we just don't get invested in it in the same way of like feeling like you need to defend it as a great idea.
That's really cool. That's a great story. I'm going to use that story. I'm going to remind myself of that story when I'm struggling to take feedback.
Yes. Wherever it comes from.
Yeah.
Right.
You kind of said that some of the inspiration might have been from being trapped in your house during COVID and watching different traveling shows, but what was like the inspiration for the like plot line of the book?
The plots for Leanne and I in this book, it was sort of what if. Okay, so what if they're on this boat, and then what if she goes missing, and then what if like it goes viral, and what if all these other people start getting involved that really have no business injecting themselves into the problem. And how do the police handle that? And I actually one of my college friends became a detective, and her voice is in the book a little bit, where she talks about the Inspector Knowles that comes through that way when she says, Rachel, my friend told me we catch so many criminals because of social media, because they have their geotags are on and there's outstanding warrants. They just like pose with the proceeds of their robbery or whatever. It's, and so we wanted to make them, we wanted to write something like we like to read, which is not too dark, fast-paced, not women victimized on every page kind of thing. That's really hard for me to read, and I think hard for Leanne to read. So we wanted something that kicked along and that maybe spoke to some of these different elements that we're all living with the advent of social media, and how it impacts how people become influencers, because our main characters are having this sailing channel. So
you just kind of what ifed until you had a whole story.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Lots of phone calls, a couple boot camps, like Leanne said. So
so they're living on a sailboat. Have either of you guys lived on a boat before, or how did you research it if you haven't?
So being poor in college, being poor in college and live with a lot of people in a very small space.
That's true.
The cruisers.
I definitely I had not had boat experience, but I've certainly had experience like sharing accommodations with messy roommates and being the messy roommate. And so those frictions of living on a boat, the claustrophobia of it, come by naturally.
Yeah.
Dani's room is straight out of my son's room, I think.
You were like, I was getting my frustration out with Dani.
Yeah. I lived on a boat for 10 days in 2001. My college friend and my mom and some of her family, we all went on this sailing boat trip. We flew into Tahiti and
Nice.
sailed around a couple of islands. And back then it was like $100 a day to stay on the boat, and all the food was on the boat. So you had to make your own food. I mean, you could get a chef as an additional expense, which we didn't do. We did get a captain for the boat because he was French, because there's so many coral heads and things in those off Bora Bora and these islands that if you're inexperienced, you're going to be running amok.
Yeah.
So, or aground, I guess. And so I had to share a bed with my mom, this little tiny berth, and I would go to bed before her. And every night getting into the bed, my mom's not super flexible. She would like kick me in the head getting into the berth. So I was like, and it was just, you could hear everyone talking. You could hear not just on our boat, but if we were anchored in a place where there were a bunch of other boats, the water just traveled, or the sound travels right across the water. And it really felt like you could hear what was going on the other boats. So it was, it was gorgeous. It was an incredible trip. It was a lot cheaper back then. And, but it really does give you sort of that sense of like how hard it is to live on a boat, how hot it is. There's not, water, things like that. So
I would not survive is what I took away from it. I'm fine on land. So you do also there's like a decent amount of social media commentary that we've kind of talked about, but how did you guys approach like which parts of that you wanted to include in it?
That's an interesting question. I guess like we're so immersed in it that we talk about it all the time. And I think like for both of us, we have this kind of like profound ambivalence about it. And did you all hear about that story this week that it's like such a little microcosm of social media of the guy, the married guy who was flying from Houston to New York, and he met some woman in the hotel, in the airport bar, and they were having drinks, and then he gets on the plane and he convinces her to sit beside him. And so a woman across the aisle is like listening to their drunken conversation as this married guy tells this woman he's trying to seduce about his family and his kids and like all this. So she starts like going on TikTok and outing this guy for like, hey, Katie in Houston, your husband's trying to cheat on you. And anyway, like, of course,
that's
within
amazing.
An hour, like TikTok had found the wife, and I'm like, I'm just sitting with this and going like, I do not know what to feel about that, because like it's amazing and so powerful, and like what a powerful tool, and like how terrible at the same time. Like it's like and I feel like every interaction that we have with social media has these like different parts where it's simultaneously like amazing and terrible. And and I feel like we sort of explored like a lot of the more terrible side in our book, and like but we both have, I think, I can say like a really deep-seated ambivalence toward it, where it's like I love this, and I find some aspects of it super entertaining and engaging, and like really have some great communities like in my own life that are like social media based. But at the same time, I kind of wonder what it's doing to us. Like, is it, is that a moral panic? Is it, I think about those things a lot. And I think there's no real answers to those questions.
And especially if you
Mm-hmm.
have teens, we both have teenagers, and it's disturbing, you know,
Yeah.
the time spent online, the controls you try to put in place to prevent like their entire lives being lived online if they're so inclined. Um, it's you know, it's sobering, you know, and then the Surgeon General in the US comes out and says, you know, we need limits. And
Mm-hmm.
um, so I to research the book, I did spend a fair amount of time and landed too on some of these forums where it's cyber, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to name the website, but some of these forums where they're actively trying to investigate.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there are lots of downsides to that. I mean, there have been some isolated cases where they have been helpful to the police, right? With Gabby Petito and a handful of other cases.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the net effect may be more negative with the
Yeah.
doxing and um, the wild theories and things like that.
Yeah. It can get out of control so fast.
Right. And no
Uh,
due process. Like there's
right.
no rights, no presumption of innocence, or no kind of,
Mm-hmm.
you can be quickly tried in the court of public opinion.
It's
Um,
exactly what I was about to say.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Like it all happens online, and it's like people can just like make up their mind about it before like anything factual has been
Right.
verified. Yeah.
No time for facts.
Right. Right. And the other thing you guys touch on is kind of like how true crime people can become fanatics about it, or also like really feel like detectives themselves. So it sounds like you guys spent times in some of those forums for the research. Was there anything about it that like stood out to you that was like kind of common with people like that?
A lot of it's driven by altruism. I think people genuinely want to help and think they're helping, and you know, I think we all feel a little bit of that when someone goes missing in our community.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to talk about that part of how we met Leanne, but it used to be, you know, you handed out flyers, you did searches, you did actually get involved
Mm-hmm.
in real life when someone in your community went missing. But now the community, of course, is just, you know, sprawled out into a different form.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of that same thing of as social media in terms of like it's just like really unwieldy. And I think of like the Adnan Syed case of that was the in the podcast Serial. Like it was such a huge galvanizing thing where it ended up bringing so much attention to this one case where there may have been an unjust conviction, and there were so many dramatic elements, and it was really just like one random murder case. um, and I find that it's just such an interesting dynamic because like I'm 100%, I love true crime. I really enjoy that, and I find it fascinating. And I also find the idea like that, you know, that you can crowdsource criminal investigations like incredibly empowering. Like I I love the idea of like people at home being able to like contribute to this, like uh criminals being caught. Like that to me is like
Mm-hmm.
so seductive. It's
Yeah.
super exciting, and I love it when it happens. And but it somehow it seems like that you wish that with this crowdsourcing that it would more often bring attention to cases that haven't received a lot of attention, where it seems like
Yeah.
in practice it's the opposite, like with Gabby Petito. And you know, where it's like so much, a billion tweets about one person when there's so many other worthy people that have suffered similar fates in the same time framing. get zero attention. So
Mhm.
it's like that's the unwieldiness of it. You can't control it, and
Mhm.
you can't make it super effective. But that
Yeah.
was um
Yeah, it's kind of it's the way I have talked about internet in general is that like it's made up of humans. So in some ways it's not like the internet that's good or bad. It's just it's like who's controlling certain spaces of it and how are certain humans acting in certain areas. So it is there's like what was that Netflix doc? Was that Don't Fuck with Cats or whatever
yeah,
where like
yeah,
that story is super fun and like gets you super
right.
excited about like the fact that like everyone could come together and like figure something
And
out. But
catching
then on the
cannibals.
flip, yeah, right,
It's
right,
amazing.
yeah, and then but then on the flip side, sometimes, which you guys kind of touched on this, but there's also a book called Missing White Woman by Kelly Garrett.
Yeah.
And I had just read that before I read your guys. And she kind of touches in that book on how, like, sometimes though, people are completely sure they figured out who the problem is and they're like posting it all over the place. And someone's life gets ruined and they weren't even the person that did anything.
Right.
So there's like that negative side.
Oh yeah. I mean, the Ramsey case, the list is long of suspects whose lives have been kind of ruined
Mhm.
by the court of public opinion, coming down on 6 different people that are peripherally related or may be, the killer. It's
Mhm.
I mean, there's an American woman missing in the Bahamas right now, actually.
Oh, wow.
Um, yeah, it has been headline news for the last day or two.
Mhm.
She disappeared from a yoga retreat, I think in Nassau or somewhere. And
Wow.
but because in our book there's a woman goes missing in the Bahamas. It's not, I mean, I think I did see the State Department had like a level 2 travel warning for the Bahamas, but really those 2 islands where, the more populated areas where there is some crime. And there is
Mhm.
a part in our book where the the inspector talks to her boss and he says, we have all these missing people and this one gets more attention than any of them have gotten, and she's
Mhm.
been missing like a few days. And she's pretty, she looks good in a bikini, like
Mhm.
she's people reposted her picture everywhere, and it really tells you a lot about um what gets attention and resources in our society.
Yeah. Yeah, it is unfortunate that in that direction. Yeah. I mean, obviously we want everyone's cases to get attention, but it's just they don't.
Right.
Yeah. So what draws you guys to writing in the thriller genre?
This is a great question. um it's I don't know. It's there's so many possibilities. There's so many different types of stories in that genre.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are tropes, but as someone who read a lot of romance, um, it the tropes can be sort of mixed up and turned on their heads, and I think you can play more with an ending, obviously, than a romance. I mean, if you're billing it as romance, it has to have an HEA or an HFN, right? But
Mm-hmm.
with thrillers, I think you have like so much leeway of what you can write about and what
Mm.
kinds of people you can bring into the mix and what you can sort of make them do to each other, man's inhumanity to man, grudges, and it's pretty fascinating. It's definitely the darker side of human nature, whereas romance is sort of the lighter side, I guess.
Upbeat. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That's why I like reading them.
Hmm.
Right. That's what we set out to like write the kind of book that we enjoy reading, which is like, not too dark like we talked about before, but
Yeah.
like entertaining. And we also like the sort of true crime aspect of it, in the sense of like we're trying to convey something that would like realistically happen in the world, which is like sort of like half the thrillers are like in that camp, and others have a more fantastical bent of like things that are like, well, did not see that coming. It's like because it's something super unlikely. What Rachel always refers to as facial blindness, like when that's what what the plot twist is, like, oh, suffering from facial blindness. So
Yeah.
yeah, we both like things where it's like a bit more true to life, and maybe a bit like grittier, but not super dark, but still fun, and like in the popcorn thriller genre of like escapism and enjoyable and just kind of fun.
Yes.
Yeah, when Crooked Lane gave us our pub date of July 9th, I'm like, yes, this is beach read territory. I mean, it is, I think, sort of a quintessential beach read.
Yes.
Take it to the pool, to the beach, to the lake. It's an entertaining, fun day with a book. I think.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It is like perfect summer reading. Like even the like on location or not on location. What am I thinking of? Or
the
destination
setting.
thriller.
Yeah,
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, like even that part just makes it fun, and it just has so many fun twists. It's like I feel like I read it so fast. It might have been 2 days, but it was because I had work on one of them.
Right?
That's great.
Yeah.
We like to hear.
Yeah. So I hope I know the answer to this question, but do you guys plan to write together again?
Yeah, definitely.
Nice.
We're working on it right now. So
that's awesome.
Keeping it through the pipeline. Yeah.
Yeah. I am very excited to see what else you guys come out with. Where can people follow you to stay up to date with everything?
On social media.
Yeah, right. Ironically, on Instagram. We're probably most active on Instagram. We do have Facebook. We are on TikTok, but and we post videos on TikTok. So TikTok.
Nice.
Yeah. And the book comes out July 9th. So that's like it's like 10 days or something.
Yeah.
And then the audiobook is on NetGalley right now. So I wanted to do a plug for that. Dreamscape has the rights to that. And it's already getting a lot of downloads on NetGalley. And it has a cast of 5 voice actors who are amazing. I don't know if you do much audiobook, but it's the characters are so well cast. It's just incredible.
That is what's so cool is right before we got on, one of my friends who knew that I had read the book texted me and she was like, I just saw that On the Surface is on audio on NetGalley. And she was like, do you think it's one that like I could follow via audiobook? And I was like, I definitely think so. And I was like, I don't know yet, but there's a chance there are multiple narrators too. So that's super exciting to hear because I like just told her like go request it.
Oh yeah, 5 narrators. We got Frankie Corzo and Ethan Evan Sibley and Shantae and Savvy and David, and they do such an incredible job. It's and it is easy to follow because it's not it is many multi POV, but it's not dual timelines or anything that would make it complicated to follow. And it's run out in days, so every chapter starts with what day she's missing. So that I think, because I get lost sometimes in books if it's, and certainly with audiobooks, when you can't flip back as easily. But yeah, no, I'm so impressed with what they did with it. It's incredible. I mean, they really voiced. Yeah. So
that is awesome. Well, hopefully everyone either reads or if they are an audiobook listening is reading too, by the way. I wasn't trying to make that delineation, but hopefully everybody gets a physical copy, or if you love audio, you go get the audio copy as well. But thank you so much for being on the podcast.
This was great. Thank you so much, Kate.
Thank you.
Yeah.